welcome to week 2 of our course. Once again, I want to share how wonderful it was to see the high level of interaction in which you engaged over the past week. Really, really great. I know that the distance learning format requires a lot of you, and your commitment to responding to and engaging with your peers is enabling an environment of curiosity and inquisitiveness, as well as one that will allow for constructive feedback to one another as we continue on through the semester. So keep it up. The course content pages you will find will be a bit more general in response to items that emerge over the course of a week and from online conversations. So I'm going to respond more specifically in our videos. So first of all, the discussion that emerged from the chart, the third online discussion, I want to say a bunch of things. As one of you noted, the chart indeed was a way to spark conversation. I did not expect that you were going to see yourself neatly aligning with one side of the chart. It was a conversation opener and one that you really took the bait on and engaged with one another. There is never an expectation in this course that you will need to agree with me or with each other. As long as you frame your reactions, responses, and beliefs in a respectful manner, which you did, and I was really happy to see, it's wonderful to hear the wide range of positions that you hold. The question of whether memorization is ever necessary or even important was one that really threaded throughout that discussion. And also about what frontal teaching could do and what is knowledge and how do we impart knowledge as educators. So a few things I want to say. There is, from my perspective, certainly room for memorization in teaching, and frontal teaching can also be an important element of many teaching environments. So I don't want you to walk away from last week thinking that I believe that that can never happen. The big question that is informing our work in this class always, for whatever it is we are exploring, is why are you employing the methods you are employing? So, for example, if you ask students to memorize, always considering why, to what end. Is it because it's what worked for you as a student? Well, if so, that might be fine for you, but it might not be the right thing for your students. Is it the most efficient use of your time? Well, maybe if you only have students for a couple of hours a week and you don't get to see them very much, you feel like they memorize at home and then come in ready to roll. Okay, that's fine, but then thinking about, well, how are they going to use the facts and figures that they have memorized? They are going to go to another level in their learning. How is that going to happen? Likewise, just off the track from memorization, do you believe in doing fun activities with your learners? I hear that a lot from my students, and I always say, great, well, is there something beyond a fun activity? Why are you engaging them in any particular activity? Is it because you just want them to blow off steam? Well, that's wonderful, but then let's acknowledge that. Let's be honest with ourselves. If it's the end of a long day and we're engaging our learners in a Jeopardy game, it might just be a fun way to get them to blow off steam. Maybe it's a review of some material, but let's be honest about why we're engaging our learners in any particular activity. Is your goal to foster critical thinking on a particular issue? If so, then we want to consider what methods will most support this goal. So always considering what it is that you're trying to achieve with your learners and what is the best way of getting there. The idea is to do all we can to support ourselves in being intentional educators. Key is the word intentional. To select methods that align with your philosophy, your values, your goals for teaching. And as we will explore this week, to set up and utilize our teaching space in a way that will also align with our beliefs about how and why we want to engage our learners. Getting back to memorization or rote learning or transmission of knowledge, we might feel, and I really understand this, I can relate to it, that there are some things that our learners quote, just need to know. They just need to know. They need to know the names of the holidays. They need to know the names of the parshiot. They need to know whatever it is you think they need to know. I've often have students in my course who are teaching intensive adult education courses. There's one specifically in New York City that prepares adults for conversion. So it's a Judaism 101 class of sorts that covers things such as kashrut, chagim, and this is a good example of where I push students to consider the format of their sessions. If you have 1 2-hour session out of 20 sessions to talk about kashrut with adults, how will you spend that time? Chances are that if these learners wanted to learn more, really be serious about kashrut, they would need to study the laws and gain more exposure outside of your class, outside of your 2-hour class. So what would you do with those 2 hours? This is a really good example because it comes up a lot. I would argue that you wouldn't want to spend those 2 hours frontally lecturing and having them list in a notebook what the elements of kashrut are and having them just take notes. I would suggest that you could engage them in some preparatory reading, and that would be very helpful. And then to have them work in class, maybe do an activity to reinforce some of the key concepts. Maybe you would have them work, for example, in groups to prepare a menu for a meat or a parve meal, and then have them discuss, grapple with, and think critically about why kashrut might be meaningful to their expanding practice. It's relevant to modern American life and or contemporary approaches to kashrut observance. So considering, well, how would you use the time to take them to a deeper level if memorization is something that could be done outside of class? Now, you might disagree and have a different take on how to use the 2 hours. I'm not saying that's the best way, it's just one example. My point is that with these students, you want to help them consider, we want to consider for ourselves how to make limited use of our time with our learners. We can't do everything. It's just not possible. So if memorization in advance of a session, for example, this session on kashrut on the types of fish or animals that are permissible would be useful to a class activity, then wonderful. Have them do it before class. My caution is that we should only have students memorize what they will actually need to apply within a deeper learning context. My belief is memorization within itself, there's no reason for that. It's to help to take learners to a higher level. Think for yourselves back to the items that you've been asked to memorize. What are the items that you remember? Likewise, if you've taken a course before or a class, maybe in high school, where you took a lot of notes and you had notebooks filled with notes, what is it that you remember from those classes? Consider and take that to your own thinking about what types of activities would be most useful to you as an educator. One of you mentioned that you're not sure what constructing knowledge means. What did I mean by that? So that makes sense that you're not quite sure what that means. We haven't really talked about it yet. This will emerge a lot more about halfway through our course. But as a preview, the main idea is that we will be focusing together on how, as educators, we can structure, introduce, provide, and facilitate activities and assignments that enable students to have deep understandings. Rather than depositing knowledge in their brains, we want to help to facilitate their own understanding and making meaning of material. This might still feel very vague to you. Again, that makes sense. But let me give you an example from this past week. I could have last week put a whole 1-hour YouTube lecture up and some diagrams about different images of and approaches to teaching. I could have done that. What I decided to do, and that was my choice, my intentional choice, was to spark through this chart a conversation, a very rich conversation that ensued in which you were able to offer to one another many great questions and ideas about what it means to teach. If I had offered my own take in several pages, you could have read it and memorized and spit it back to me. I wanted you to be engaged in the learning, and my role was to facilitate that process. So there is one example. I hope it's a helpful one. This week we will be building upon that wonderful interaction in which you engaged, and there's more to come on constructivism. Just a few more things. As I said a few minutes ago, there is definitely no one-size-fits-all in this course. You have different experiences in the field and a wide array of perspectives on what it means to teach. This week is about beginning to explore and sharing with me and with others your particular voice, your authentic voice as an educator. And you might not be clear on what comprises that voice. As you go through this week's course content, it's going to help you to start paying attention to what do you see as your voice. How do you use your literal voice? How do you use your hands? How do you make eye contact with your learners? What types of ways do you engage them? How do you demonstrate enthusiasm to your subject area? What are the ways that you are, as an educator, feel like a whole person in your teaching? By the end of this course, you will be able to clearly communicate your approach to teaching and demonstrate how the types of activities and assessments and strategies you choose reflect your overarching beliefs and values. So this is an ongoing process. I don't expect it to be super clear by the end of this week. It's just the beginning. As we engage together in this endeavor about reflective practicing, we will become clearer on the kinds of educators we want to be and why we do what we do. So I very much look forward to engaging in week 2 together with you.